In the past day or so, some of my Patreon members and I have been talking about something that I really hadn't thought about before, which is the significant global economic impact of autonomous vehicles and electric vehicles combined, and how, if a country gets left behind in this, it could actually lose its status as a developed nation, or alternatively, if a developing nation gets on the bandwagon fast enough, they could actually leapfrog several other countries and become a significant player in the global economy. Let's take a look. And for those of you interested in investing, check out WeBull, an amazing platform for buying and selling stocks, and now cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, Dogecoin, and others. Open an account and get a free stock valued at up to $200, and fund your account and get another free stock valued at up to $1,600. Check out the link in the description and help the channel at the same time. Hey y'all, it's Dr. Know-It-All. So I want to start off by mentioning two things. Number one, I'm going to do an episode on the master plan part 3 that Elon has teased recently. I'm going to talk about what I think is going to be in the master plan. That's probably coming out tomorrow, so you should subscribe to this channel if you haven't already so you can catch that episode, because it'll be good. And secondly, some breaking news that just came over the wire from Claudia. Thank you for, she's my German office. She's always telling me stuff that's going on in Germany. But anyway, Inside EVs has reported, I'll leave the link to the entire article in the description. This is of course a translation from German into English, but it says, quote, Germany supports the EU Commission's proposal to phase out combustion engines in 2035. Apparently the federal government is no longer demanding an exception for e-fuels. Environment Minister Steffi Lemke, I hope I pronounced that somewhat close to right, said the Traffic Light Coalition supports the EU executive's plan on all points. That means ultimately that internal combustion engines for cars and vans will be phased out from 2035. Automotive News Europe quoted the Green politician as saying. So this is actually just a piece in a much bigger puzzle, of course, but it's actually a significant piece. Germany had been putting up roadblocks, so the EU bloc, remember you've got, France, Germany, Italy, lots of other countries, right? So you've got the EU bloc that was trying to make regulations to phase out internal combustion engines. I believe that the market is going to dictate this anyway and it won't matter, but Germany had been putting up roadblocks because they wanted to be able to use e-fuels like biofuels and things like that, as opposed to just going completely EV. So they finally backed down on that position, which is significant because it means that the EU will actually put this into place. Again, this is only 13 years from now as it stands, so this is pretty significant. I believe, again, by 2030 or so, that the market is going to basically have dictated that passenger cars are mostly going to be EVs at that point anyway. So it's probably not going to matter that much, but it's still an important sort of thing that, you've got governmental entities, large governmental entities, including the EU, which never agrees on anything, has said that they want to make this thing happen. It's part of the carbon neutrality work, and this is in conjunction with going more green in terms of solar and wind and hydro and geothermal, etc. So anyway, it's part and parcel of that whole thing, and like I said, it's just a little piece in this puzzle, but it does mean that Germany and like the likes of BMW and other companies that have said like, hey, we're going to manufacture gas-powered cars well into the 2040s, that's probably not going to happen if the EU itself and Germany have agreed to phase this out by then. Again, I think that this is ultimately not all that important because the market is going to dictate all of this happens anyway. People aren't going to want to buy gas-powered cars anymore soon. If you look at the Tesla demand that's gone on recently, it's just up at such a ridiculous level that Tesla keeps raising prices. I think it went up another $5,000 on average for their cars over just the past week because demand is up so much because gas prices are up. So as might be expected under the circumstances, consumers are like, give me these alternative types of cars. But what I want to focus on specifically today is not consumer cars. I want to talk about commercial transportation, in other words, trucks. So yeah, we've got airplanes and we've got ships and things like that, but I specifically want to focus on trucks and specifically long-haul trucks. So first of all, why does this matter? Well, if you look at a lot of everyday use items, the cost of transportation can add 20 to 30% of the cost of the good itself. So if you take something like a diamond and gold ring or something that somebody makes in Amsterdam, and then somebody buys that in like Santa Barbara, California or something, the ring might cost $5,000. It's made in Amsterdam, it gets shipped to Los Angeles via airplane. That then gets transported via truck or something like that, or UPS small truck or something to Santa Barbara where it's sold in a jeweler's. That could cost, $10 or $15 to ship this ring overseas and get it to Santa Barbara, but on a $5,000 ring, it's negligible, right? So if it goes from $15 to $20, it doesn't really matter. Or alternatively, if the shipping goes from $15 to $10, it doesn't really matter. The cost of the ring to the consumer is going to more or less be the same. At the other extreme is something like a watermelon. A watermelon is a commodity good. It weighs several kilos, so it's very heavy to ship. And you have to ship it, right? If you live in a place where you can't really grow watermelons, at least not at a particular time of year, then what you have to do is you have to have it shipped. So it could be 500 or 1,000 miles or something. And yes, I'm going to use miles in today's episode just because I'm going to deal with US numbers when I ballpark all of this stuff. Just multiply by 1.6 and you'll get kilometers. Anyway, normally I deal with kilometers, but everything's in miles per gallon and miles per gallon equivalent and everything, so it's just easier in this situation. So basically, if you want to figure out how many kilometers, I'm going to talk about a 500-mile trip, so it's 800 kilometers, so you can just substitute that if you want. But anyway, if you're transporting a watermelon, let's say a watermelon costs at the store $2.50 or something like that. I actually haven't bought a watermelon in a long time. But anyway, so you've got several kilos and it costs that much money. That means that there could be, probably in this circumstance, it's 30 to 40% of the cost of that watermelon is taking it, putting it in a truck, driving it along with a whole bunch of other watermelons, several hundred miles to the destination, offloading it, putting it in the grocery store, and you purchase it. So the watermelon itself could cost substantially more than it would if magically you could wave a magic wand and just have the watermelon suddenly go from the garden or the farm that it was grown in to the store. It might cost something like $1.50 or $1.75 as opposed to $2.50. So transportation is a significant cost of a commodity good like that, especially a heavy one. And of course, with the cost of diesel fuel going up really radically since the war in Ukraine has started, you've got a situation where you've got a heavy inflationary pressure where you've got an element that could be a third of the cost of an item like this has increased drastically because of diesel costs. That means that you're going to see an immediate increase in produce and goods at Walmart, things that are being shipped from China, whatever, it doesn't matter. But general commodity goods, again, not lightweight, things like this that are luxury goods that cost a lot of money and the cost of shipping is negligible. For most commodity goods, and especially for ones that weigh a significant amount of money, the shipping cost becomes a significant element of the cost of that good. All right, so I've got some notes on my phone here so I get the numbers approximately right. I want to be really clear. These are just numbers. I do have as accurate as I could get, but these are just ballpark spitballing numbers. You substitute your own numbers if you want to. Certainly if you're in the European Union or someplace else, you can substitute the costs that you have for all of these things, which are going to generally be substantially higher in all cases. But anyway, this is a comparative thing. So it's not exact numbers. Don't be like, hey, that's, not down to the penny exactly the number I would have picked out of the hat. But I was trying to be as accurate as possible to get a reasonable comparison. But these are just for instance numbers, so take them as they are. Okay, so let's start with a diesel-powered truck. Currently, as of a week or two ago in March of 2022, diesel gas was about $4.30 on average in the country, in the United States, per gallon. And a truck generally gets about 7 miles per gallon, again-ish. And you've got a 300-gallon tank, not that that matters that much. Plus, you have to add in the cost of a driver. A driver costs about 40 cents a mile for a driver. So for a 500-mile trip, if you were going from, I think, Atlanta to Cincinnati is somewhere around 500 miles. So, just imagine that sort of distance, or Atlanta to maybe Richmond, Virginia. I think that's about 500 miles. Anyway, something along those lines. It would cost approximately $507 for that trip, including the cost of gas. This isn't even including the maintenance on the vehicle or anything like that. That's just the cost of the diesel fuel and the cost of the driver. All right, and now we get a little bit more speculative because we don't have exact numbers, but the best information I could find is that a Tesla semi-truck is going to get about 19 miles per gallon equivalent, or more importantly for this discussion, it will get about 0.5 miles per kilowatt hour. And people have speculated it's got about a 1.2 megawatt hour battery pack. So again, it doesn't really matter. It just means it can go 500 miles on a charge, more or less. All right, so worst case scenario, consumer level superchargers currently cost 28 cents per kilowatt hour on average around the country. I saw that myself as I was driving to see my parents. It said 28, 29 cents, something like that. Now, I think that a trucking company is generally going to get better rates than that, and we'll talk about that in a minute. So if you add that up with a driver making the same amount of money and everything, you end up with $480 per trip as opposed to $507, which is a small percentage savings, but it's also not, it's not insignificant. What really starts to add up here is when you think about autonomy for these vehicles. And this is what's important. We've got a combination of two things happening right now. We've got electric vehicles taking the place of ICE vehicles. Again, the German decision is actually something that correlates with all of this stuff. So it's really interesting. And at the same time, you've got the disruption of autonomy. So again, I'm not going to argue about when this is going to happen, but at some point, autonomous trucks are going to take over for human-driven trucks. It doesn't matter if that happens in 2 years or in 5 years or whatever. But so again, let's just kind of think about this. Just assume that this has happened. It's sometime in the future, and we now have fully autonomous trucks that can drive the 500-mile trip without any human intervention, and you don't need people in the truck. So now, even with the exact same electric rates, we've just shaved another $200 off of that trip. So we've now got a $280 cost for the 500-mile trip, or a 45% savings in cost. And that's a pretty big deal already. But let's go further. So again, like I said, I don't think that these trucking companies are going to pay almost 30 cents per kilowatt hour. I think that they will get bulk rates, and certainly they can also set up chargers at their own warehouses and make deals directly with power companies. So they'll probably save some money. So let's just take a guesstimation. If it was 15 cents per kilowatt hour instead, then the trip only costs $150 as opposed to $507, or a 70% cost savings. And then if you take it to the extreme, I'm currently paying 4.7 cents per kilowatt hour at home to charge my car. So let's say 5 cents per kilowatt hour. If they could get that rate from a power company, then the entire trip, the whole thing would cost $50 for the trip as opposed to $507, which is a 91% cost savings. So there you have it. If you take this case, you're saving somewhere between 50% and 90% of the cost of transporting a good. And if you say like with something like a watermelon, that's a third the cost of it and you're saving 90%, you're going down from 30% the cost of the good down to 3%, which means you can almost get rid of the transportation costs, which means that you could knock that off of the cost of these goods, which means that inflationary pressures will reduce a lot and the cost of goods could be reduced significantly, and or these companies can make more profit because they can, kind of charge half as much as they did before and still make more profit. So this is a real win-win for companies and for consumers. But let's think about the larger picture, the GDP, the global domestic product. Think about overall for all goods, let's just say 25% of the cost of all goods is transportation. If you have an economy that depends on transportation, which almost every economy does, and you don't go with autonomy and you don't go with EVs, you're still paying the cost right now, and gas is likely going to continue to go up over time, which means that you're going to keep paying these premiums and these premiums and these premiums, which means that everything costs more in your country or your union or whatever it is, versus a country that gets behind EVs and a country that gets behind autonomy. And so that country that gets behind these two things will have a huge economic advantage over a country that doesn't do this. And that means, number one, that a fully developed country that doesn't get behind these things could fall behind other countries, and actually their economy could become less, powerful in the world, or less of a deciding factor in the world. And that is huge. The other factor is in the developing country, and admittedly, the cost of fuel and the cost of drivers in developing countries isn't as much as it is in developed countries. So the savings won't be quite as much. But a country that's a developing country. I hate these terms because they seem really icky, but I don't know how else to shorthand it. But anyway, a country that, isn't like fully developed at this point, that they still could save quite a bit of money on this to save their consumers and to boost their economy, so they could actually leapfrog other economies that aren't as aggressive about getting behind autonomy and getting behind the EV transition. So this actually has huge implications. I would say this is all going to play out over the next, 5, 6, 7, 10 years, something like that. So by 2030-ish, we should really start to see this happening. Again, I'm not going to say exactly when these regulations are going to get in place, but the fact of the matter is that if countries start looking at this, and people who are in positions of power hopefully are smart enough to actually go like, oh crap, this could actually have a huge impact on our economy, we better push this and be at the forefront instead of lagging behind. you could see these regulations get pushed forward a lot faster than you think, right? So instead of thinking like, oh, 2028, 2029, we'll see autonomy and the push for EVs and things like that. Rather than that, we could see 2024, 2025, this heavy duty push by aggressive governments. And that will be really world changing. It certainly is going to change the transportation market because you're going to reduce the need for drivers. And currently right now, you could say, well, that's really bad for people who are drivers and everything. But there is such a huge shortage of drivers that it's actually a problem. And my wife's ex-husband said recently that he's a truck driver, and he said that his company is not even taking jobs right now because the cost of gas is so much right now that they actually don't make enough money on a lot of trips and they're turning it down. So we're having problems in terms of growing the economy because of transportation costs. So reducing transportation costs is going to be a win-win even for people in that industry because there's such a dearth of people who are working in that industry, and it costs so much currently that it's actually going to be more beneficial even for people in that industry to have these things happening. And again, like I said, for developing countries, they could actually leapfrog several other countries and have their GDP become larger because effectively they reduce the cost of everything in their country. And then of course, alternatively, if you've got countries that are being really slow and being like, nah, we don't want to do this, we want to protect X, Y, and Z because we've got lobbies and things like that that are trying to protect them, or we're just too scared to move forward rapidly, they could really fall behind the curve and their GDP could be depressed compared to every other country's GDP that is more aggressive. So this has really, really big global economic impacts, and I thought it was really worth at least bringing this to the forefront and letting people think about it now, because I predict that's going to be a major pressure on getting things towards autonomy and moving them towards electric vehicles for commercial transportation a lot sooner than people think. Of course, I'd be interested to know what you think about this. Remember, these numbers are all just kind of toy numbers that I'm playing around with. It's a comparative exercise, but I'd be super interested to find out what you think about all of this. Just let me know in the comments. All right, I hope you enjoyed this episode and found it fun and interesting. If you did, please do like it so other people can find it. And of course, consider subscribing for more of this. In particular, Tesla's Master Plan Part 3. I'll be doing an episode on that very, very shortly. As always, a huge shout out to my patrons on Patreon. This one is all due to you because of the discussion that we had in the last day or so. I thought about doing this episode. So if you want to join the team and you want to have some conversations with some very bright, very nerdy, very interesting people, definitely check out the link in the description and join the team. And if you're interested in a whole bunch of really cool merch, check out our merch store. Link is in the description. We have TeslaBot t-shirts, the Tesla meme t-shirt, Success is a Possible Outcome, 4680 battery cells. All of that stuff is on t-shirts, mugs, tumblers, and on. So check it out. And for those of you interested in investing, check out WeBull, an amazing platform for buying and selling stocks, and now cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, Dogecoin, and others. Open an account and get a free stock valued at up to $200, and fund your account and get another free stock valued at up to $1,600. Check out the link in the description and help the channel at the same time. Thank you. And finally, don't forget we are both Tesla and Amazon affiliates. If you look in the description, you can see how going shopping for a solar roof, a power wall, or anything on Amazon helps out the channel. In the meantime, I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.